chargé de la recherche et de la documentation, which means responsible, something they say head of research, but I don't have anyone under me, so I have nobody, it's a bit strange. But I work between these things, paper, folders, and this stuff, so film cans, film reels, and of course a lot of digital stuff that is everywhere, so I have no need to show it. But among the research things, projects I have developed in the recent years, one was focused on writing, and most notably writing on screen, hence the title of this talk, written on the screen. More precisely, not only writing on screen, but typographic writing as presented on screen. And I will say even more specific in experimental field and artist fields. So the outcome was a 5-year research project, 4 or 5 year research project, and the outcome is this book published by MUBI Editions in collaboration with the Museum, with the Centre Pompidou. And it's, I'm not the only author, it's co-written with 2 esteemed colleagues, Smet and Philippe Millot, who's the book designer as well. So maybe we'll get to the production part later, and I'll explain a little bit the process behind the making of this book. So again, it was a long-term research project which began in 2019 and started from, I'd say, 2 complementary impulses. One, an initial observation, very sort of observation de comptoir, almost technological and social anthropological, to be obvious maybe, but we have never read so much on screen, on our screens, and yet the idea behind it was that digital technology did not invent the reading on screen, and there was a long history of reading on screens prior to our medium-sized, bigger size, smaller size in our pockets screen. So, and cinema in particular was the point to understand the reading on screen, and even more particularly, and this is the other point of it, so I'm showing behind the cover of the book. This was, it brings us to the more specific point of this talk. Whereas in industrial cinema, intertitles, subtitles, and credits, they occupy a marginal place. In the cinema produced, on the contrary, on the margins of the industry, center and margins are reversed. So, in fact, the written word appears to occupy a more prominent place in experimental and artist film. And we have very well-known examples in the film collection, in the Pompidou film collection, I mean, most notably Animix Cinema, the only the only finished film by Marcel Duchamp, whose it's only completed film, which has establishes a peculiar relationship with writing, in which this rotating disc are for puns in French, untranslatable, but we try to deal with that in the writing about them in the book. And they established a corporeal relationship, a physical relationship to writing, most notably because the written word is present as a physical object, as a 3-dimensional object, and also because the rest of the film works on this perceptual effect that brings the 2-dimensional image projected on screen to 3-dimensional with these optic discs. And also another example, these I'm just showing very quickly, but I'm showing some of the images that you will find in the book. Another example from the avant-garde era is L'Étoile de Mer, so Starfish by Man Ray. Another field which intertitles play an important part, so it's based on a poem by another avant-garde artist, Robert Snows. And it's set into images by Gray. And along with Anemic Cinema, L'Étoile des Mers was defined by a critic in the 1940s, Jacques Bernard Brunius, as an example of, and I quote the definition, purely poetic intertitles devoid of any utilitarian necessity. So these were the two key examples from the 1920s, from the avant-garde era, of the importance and presence and different uses of the written word in artistry. So these are, again, two of the works we discuss in the book. Two of the works which are present in the Pompidou film collection, and just so we mentioned the story of two works from the collection just above us on the third floor. But so we have it's a collection of roughly 1,500 works founded in the mid-70s to complete the collection of the Musée National Moderne, which was pre-existing, and integrate the moving image into its collection. So a collection which houses especially experimental and artist film, but more broadly film produced on the margins of the industry, so scientific films, archival, bit of documentary, and other various different things. Starting from this collection, so we organize, what I usually do, we organize this research project. This one, I show just a bit of behind the scenes, a bit of back history that preceded the publication of the book, because this research project was also carried out with these two co-authors of the book, so Smet and Millot. It was a long-term research project. It was carried out with the students also at ENSAD, so École Nationale Supérieure des Arts Décoratifs, where Philippe Millot teaches. So with students dealing with graphic design, most notably. And also at the University of Paris, where Catherine de Smet teaches art history, the history of graphic design. So I show you just another workshop, this one held during the COVID era at the Centre Pompidou in our theatre. One part of the things we were trying to tackle during this research project was something related also to the situation of the screening. So we have shown films, we have discussed films, but we also discussed the way in which we could or we should show them. And most notably, we talked about the ephemera and program notes, which is an important production, in fact, in the real, especially of experimental and artist film, conveying a bit more, a supplement to what you will actually see projected on screen. And during this research project, we had a screening series which took place in 2022, and which was accompanied by a series of produced on the location, so these booklets that were accompanying each of the screens, carrying text, sometimes translated for the first time into French, on the films or by the artists to make the films we were showing. And I wanted to show, just to give you an idea of what we discussed and what eventually went and became part of the publication of the book. I show you an example which appears in the book and that we showed as well in this screening series at the museum in 2022. It's a film by Michael Snow, an Indian artist. From 1982, entitled So Is This, and I show you a very brief excerpt. It's science. So this is a film to watch together, as we will see only a bit of an excerpt. It's a film to be read only. Because again, it's a silent film, but I will say something more about it later on. And again, it's as you see in the excerpt, it's a film written by enunciated by a narrator, which is like in line. The film is not 2 hours long. It's only 45 minutes, 42 minutes, I think. It actually stages a reading group, so to speak, a collective reading, which is something that reading in the modern era is not necessarily something collective, it's something we do on our own, usually, by ourselves. And it stages something for a collective audience. We found it quite interesting. Again, a film to be read, a silent film, but in fact, according to the author, according to Michael Snow himself, it is not exactly a silent film. In order to read, we summon an inner voice. It's a process called subvocalization, I think. That enables us to actually understand what we are reading. So in fact, at the end of the screening, we realize we have been hearing our own inner voice, and it's not completely, and it's a silent film. Maybe we could call it a subvocalized film. Also, the other thing is that maybe a short excerpt you have already noticed, is it sometimes referred to as a black and white film, or white on black film. That is not true, in fact. The film was shot on an outdated film stock, color film stock, that produces here and there flares of colors, of light, and in fact the abstract perception of reading white words on a black screen is more complicated than what it seems at the beginning. It's actually a color film. So a film that is not a film that is silent, but not completely colorful, expanded film stock colors. So it deals with the materiality of writing, with materiality of film itself, obviously. And when we showed this film during the screening series, we actually wanted to show through a particular angle that of the peculiar typeface that has been used to write this film. In fact, many of you might have noticed already, but we can recognize Helvetica, or rather a type of Helvetica, probably the most well-known typeface in the whole world, used almost everywhere, from advertising to communication, to different company logos around Helvetica. And that's what we actually wanted to discuss during this screening series, in which we invited a graphic designer and poet, who introduced not as much the film, but introduced the typeface to the audience. But again, working on the book, this is the fun part. Depends on the definition you have of fun, but it was fun for us. We looked at some details when making these pictures for the book. And my co-writer, Philippe Millot, noticed something peculiar about this number 2. I don't know if there are graphic designers in the audience, but he immediately went, this is surely not Helvetica. In fact, we were wrong. Yes, in fact, if you look at the figure number 2, you will see, and I've prepared it for you, that it is not exactly the same form, the same shape. So he actually realized it was an aging book, a linear typeface that looks a bit like Helvetica, so you have time to look at find the differences. There are maybe I think two symbols in which you can notice. One is number 2, of course, and there's the pound sterling symbol that's also different, except it doesn't appear in the film, so we could only rely on number 2 to identify this typeface. So that's the kind of information, very useful information you can find in our book, apart from discussing experimental films. I wanted to show you another example, which you have on just on the stairs, just on the upper floor. I will show you not an excerpt. I will show you several times icon keynote ability modeling. There we go. You can see it upstairs installed in a similar display as this one. This one was also installed at, just when it was acquired, so the film is from 1969/1979, conceived in 1969 but made only in 1979. And this is an installation view from the extra literature festival that took place at Centre Pompidou in 2022. So a festival which was devoted to, I would say, écriture non-livresque, non-book related writing, and it was installed as a loop, as you see it on the floor just above us. So as you have understood, this film is 5 seconds long. It's composed of, let's say, 3 seconds that are distributed as such. Icon is seen for 1 second. You can read from 1 second, 24 frames. And then you have 24 different frames of shuffling of permutations of letters that are combined in all these different ways. And they turn into keynote at the end. So it's a journey between those two worlds. As you may realize, even if if you're not fluent in German, there's the trajectory that leads us from icon. So icon, literally icon in the semiotic sense of term, but you could use it. The artist picked it because of its resemblance to the Greek eikon, so a way of designating an image very simply. And so it's an image we all understand. English it's we all understand in different languages. And the journey leads us to kino, which is cinema, but more specifically maybe in German it's the theater, the venue in which you actually go to watch films. So that's why maybe this the use of this typeface, which recalls the luminous signs in an urban setting, or that could recall this kind of signs. That's one of the point of view of interestingly. This is also one of the things discussed in the book, and the point of view of Catherine de Smet is she found a clue, at least in this kind of modular typeface. She found a clue in dating again from the 1920s, so in a way where it all began, in a way from the experimental uses of typography. In this book by Nash, in the film script Dynamics of the Metropolis, this is actually a very similar type of modular typeface. That's actually there's a caption which reads, you can probably clearly read it, electric signs with luminous writing which vanishes and reappears, which writes morally, so it's a family name, the artist family name. But again, so we're discussing in the book, what we do is that we try to discuss the possible sources, inspirations, or also analyze if the alphabets, the typefaces that were used for a specific purpose by artists are actually synchronous or asynchronous with their contemporary visual culture, or if the artists were circling back to an earlier use of a singular typeface or repurposing something from the past, or sometimes it happens they were anticipating something from the visual culture to come, visual and verbal culture to come. On his side, again, my colleagues, I'm quoting them because the whole book is a conversation between the three of us, in which I discuss more about the films, and they discuss more about the graphic design of the typefaces, but eventually we all talk about everything in a way. It's inevitable given the subject of the book. So Philippe Millot actually brought up this interesting, very famous production by Margaret Calvert, a modular typeface, but in which the letters are actually designed according to a grid, unlike the one in Icon Kim, in which they are optically placed in order to describe a letter. So this is a very another possible inspiration for the film, something that was actually very present in 1970s visual culture. And I wanted to show you, so the other example so to show the difference between these two modular typefaces, this other alphabet, so a much more recent one by André Baderger, who's actually closer to the one we see, in Icon Kim. On my side, as a film person, I actually saw this typeface as a I can say as a sort of a trace of something else related to film and its material culture. That is these figures that you will see in the heads or tails of developed film reels coming back from the lab, in which would have these numbers punched directly onto film in order to identify them. And it's actually something that is never seen in industrial cinema, of course, but again, it's often present in experimental and artist film. So this is just one example, another film from the Pompidou film collection, Self-Extension, by another artist and filmmaker who worked a lot with text and its relationship to the image. But one of the great absentees in our book, for a number of reasons, but still evoked in the writing. And the most famous, of course, filmmaker that left all these punch holes on this film is Andy Warhol, which didn't edit many of his 1960s films, but just put the reels from beginning to end and screen them as such. And these punch holes on his film tales, or heads or tails of the Warhol's films, are so iconic that when in the 90s the Centre Pompidou published this great catalogue about Warhol's films, in fact they decided to punch literally holes in the corners, as you can see. So this is a frame from Andy Warhol's piece, and this is actually the way in which we document the way in which we work. They were taken by a photographer. Her name is Rafael Giavetto. I showed one name in the beginning, and it's also here. And we left some of these images in the book, so that we can see again what work in the archives is made of. So I give you just a short journey in the vaults in which films are taken from. So that's one of my colleagues, Enrico Camporesi, who is actually holding one of the film cans of the films we used in the book, because we discussed in the book. The flatbed editing machine, which we would watch sometimes some excerpts in order to select the films, and, to select the stills, sorry. And this is involving the Canon Icon, the 35mm print, the original print that was used to produce the 16mm print you see upstairs. And so that's how we selected the images from the book, for the book. The process is that we would unwind the film onto this, it's not even an editing table, it's just a flatbed in order to unreel the films. And select the images we wanted. And this is actually the trickiest part is we use these little bits of threads that you can see probably here. One of the reels is full of white threads, which are bookmarks for selecting the actual image you wanted to photograph. Yes, what a print looks like once we selected the images. And that's the still camera that has been used to take these pictures. There's no strings in the book, they're all taken out, but they are pretty much everywhere. And I wanted to show you our photographer, with the 400 pictures you find in the book. And this, of course, editing station for the final Photoshop phase. So we wanted a book that was able to give us an idea of film as an object, of images as an object, and of writing as an object itself. So not only an intellectual object, but a physical one. And in fact, we realized in making these images, something we actually discussed, there was there's all unspoken layer of writing in all these films we are showing. Because as you may have noticed already, each of these film strips have some writings that are not shown during projection. They are usually seen only by, let's say, professionals. So either technicians, archivists, projectionists as well, of course. And this whole material history of film is shown in the iconography of the book itself. And in fact, not by chance, the film that concludes the book, the last film we talk about, is a 1984 film. So interestingly enough, this is not something we thought about, but Robin King was a graphic designer and graphic design historian who wrote the preface for the book. Notice something, 1984, it's the final, so the final work in our books from 1984, which is incidentally also the year in which Apple introduced the first MacBook on the market, so in which our actual understanding of writing and reading changed forever, let's say. So it's not, we didn't think about it from the beginning, but it's true that it's an important point. And I wanted to show you one excerpt, the final excerpt, the beginning of Morgan Fisher's Standard Gauge, so the last thing we talk about in the book. This is sound.
The first time I ever handled 35mm motion picture film in the summer of 1954. The older brother of a friend of mine had been working on a film in Los Angeles, and he was brought back with him to the East Coast with a souvenir of a short end of black and white negative raw file. The short end is the length of unexposed film at the end of the camera roll that is too short to be used, so it's removed from the magazine and usually discarded. I remember how moved I was at being able to handle this roll of film. In the time since then, I've worked around 35mm on and off. I've never seen a piece of 35 that I didn't want to pick up and look at, and sometimes I've been free to keep pieces that I've come across. In the summer of 1968, a friend of mine was working for the company that was going to distribute La Chinoise in this country. He spoke French, so he was given the job of preparing the English subtitles. I was in New York when the first subtitle print was ready, and my friend invited me to attend his first showing. The film had come back from the subtitling place on 1,000-foot reels, which in 35 were only about 10 minutes long. To avoid having a lot of changeovers, the projectionists consolidated the 1,000-foot reels into 2,000-foot reels, the standard size for the projection of feature films. So he had to cut off some of the head and tail leaders, which he then discarded. Materials like this, standard formats and leaders, are invariably duplicated a great deal. Copies are made from copies that are made from copies. The loss of quality that occurs from one generation to the next is inevitable. There were some typographical errors in the subtitles. The one I remember is that Hegel came out Helga.
So, in a note about the film, in the very first note he wrote about the film, Morgan Fisher described it as such: a frame of frames, a piece of pieces, a length of lengths. So he wrote his first note as a fragment of sentences itself, echoing the subject of the film. And he described again his film as a disiectamento Hollywood anthologized. So, as a director of Standard Gauge, of this final film we are discussing in the book, he's not really the author of these images, but is more or less the accidental recipient of these images. He didn't set to make them; he just collected them, and he tells the story. Of the way in which he found them. And so he's arranging them and presenting them on screen. And he becomes, in a way, this film, the editor of this anthology of Hollywood's cinematic debris. But what we liked is on what we discussed in the book. That's why we wanted to have this as a final. It's a film that describes, in a way, a cinematic industry that is only partially still alive. I mean, I wouldn't say it's entirely obsolete, but the world is describing is actually something of the past. And he's editing, so he's also, as a filmmaker, editing an anthology of fragments. And we discussed this word to edit because in the film itself, which is sort of autobiography of its maker as well, Morgan Fisher relates his past career as an editor in the film industry. So sometimes not a very glorious way of editing, second assistant editor or something like that for we would say big movie productions, films such as The Student Nurses, a film produced by Roger Corman in 1970, or the actual cult horror film Messiah of Evil, in which he was also worked as an editor and appears briefly. So he's in a way, he was an editor of film in a certain industry of the past, but he's also the editor of this anthology. The etymology is the same. To edit is to bring forth, and ends to publish in a way. So we wanted to have this as this one as the last, the final word on this particular world of material culture of film we have, and typography we have tried to analyze. So I just show you very briefly the final pages of the book. If you want a copy that you can that you can read through, and a copy of the notebook, the MUBI journal, in which we had the first attempt at writing something in the vein of this book. And of course, if you want to ask questions either now or more informally when we go out, and I encourage you to visit, of course, the installation of the Timor and the United Camporesi. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Yes?
It was just quickly, the name of the filmmaker was also named here. Just
Yes, I'll show you.
Philippe Wheeler, is that his? Because I couldn't really see.
Yes.
What's his name?
It's got
That's
Morgan Fisher.
Morgan Fisher. Okay, thank you.
And the title of the book again, please?
It has two titles, that's the difficult part. So it's read, frame, type, film. Subtitle written on the screen. Very long process of decision making to find this title. I can show you. Yes. If you want to have a look at it's here. I think we have some, yes, so we don't have the copies to purchase on site, but
Sadly, no copies here in person, but if you want to take one of these postcards from me, you can order it online with a 25%
25% discount. You know? At the end of the day, each penny makes a difference.
I think it's very interesting how, like, the words become like a sort of image, and also the reverberation of the sound of the words. Like, there's a lot of juxtaposition and strata that I think is very interesting.
Thank you.
I think it's really amazing you spent 5 years doing that.
Yes. Not only that, but yes, quite a bit of that. I mean, we didn't the collection is 1,500 films, but we discussed 24 with the book. We showed more during the program, but in fact, we realized the fact that many of the films held in the collection have a peculiar relationship to the written word, and it's not something we actually thought that way prior to working on directly. I mean, the text and image is probably the biggest topic in the world. But when you look more closely at this, the way in which things are actually written, it becomes a bit different. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming.